I will be discussing Sunnah as the second source of Sharia next to the Quran. I will be looking at the meaning of the term and some of the parallel expression like Hadith, Khabar and Asar, a little bit of the history of the Sunnah as a source of Sharia, and then classification of the Sunnah from the viewpoint of subject matter and transmission. There is some discussion about forgery in Hadith. I begin with the meaning of the term Sunnah. Sunnah literally means a clear path, a beaten track. It also means an established precedent and normative practice, the normative exemplary practice of the Prophet. But as a word, it can also mean a good practice or a bad practice. It may be by an individual or by a community. The Arabs during the lifetime of the Prophet used to refer to the precedent of their forefathers as a source of their identity and pride. The opposite of Sunnah is Bid'ah. Bid'ah, a harmful innovation that is contrary to accepted precedent. Sunnah occurs in the Quran in singular and plural forms and 16 times in total, like the Sunnah of Allah, the Sunnah of the ancestors, and the plural Sunan, but it does not use, the Quran does not use the phrase the Sunnah of the Messenger of God, Sunnatul Nabi or Sunnatul Rasul. There is a little difference between the ulama of Hadith, ulama of usul and ulama of fiqh about the meaning of Sunnah. To the ulama of usul al-fiqh, Sunnah means a source of the Sharia next to the Quran. The ulama of Hadith also include into this anything that is reported about the Prophet, including the manner he looked, the colors that he might have liked or disliked. Even reports about him before he became Prophet. But the ulama of usul do not include the shama'il in personal, natural narratives and reports about the Prophet. The ulama of fiqh place the Sunnah under the category of mandub, something good, recommendable, one of the 5 values of Sharia. In the Quran, references to Sunnah and to the Prophet himself occur. The Quran refers to the Prophet as one who has excellent character. In 7 places, the Quran uses the word kitab and hikmah side by side. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. And the Prophet teaches the people the book and the wisdom, hikmah. And the ulama have asked, the book is of course the Quran, but what is hikmah? And Imam Shafi answers that hikmah here is a reference to Sunnah. But this is not quite accurate, as we will see. There are many Quranic references demanding obedience to the Prophet. Sometimes next to Allah himself, sometimes independently obedience to the Prophet is a requirement. And there are many verses in the Quran. The Prophet himself has referred to his Sunnah For example, the hadith of Muaz ibn Jabal, when he was going to the Yaman, the Prophet asked him what he would rely on. Firstly, he said, on the Quran, then on the Sunnah of the Prophet. There is a hadith, the saying of the Prophet himself, that I left among you two things. If you hold on to them, you shall not be misguided. That is the Book of God and my Sunnah. However, on the word, it seems that there is debate, some disagreement arisen as to the actual use of the word Sunnah when it found currency in its meaning as reference to the second source of Sharia. Writers have gone on record to say that toward the end of the 1st century or early 2nd century, Sunnah was established in this sense as a reference exclusively to the conduct of the Prophet and second source of the Sharia. But when you refer to this hadith I just quoted of the Muaz ibn Jabal and other, I think this is a weak argument that to say that the word had not been recognized in early times. Other parallel words that we need briefly to look at is hadith. Hadith is carries the same meaning as Sunnah, except that Sunnah is the law that is carried by the Hadith, the value that the Hadith delivers. Hadith literally means speech. It refers to the speech of the Prophet, but it is the verbal or documented version of the Sunnah. The Hadith, in other words, is the carrier of the Sunnah. The word speech, Hadith, is a general word, and it used to be, the Arab used it in the same sense, but after the demise of the Prophet, the speech, he became the common theme of a public speech. So much so that after some time, Hadith exclusively referred to the speech of the Prophet himself. Khabar is also a parallel word to Sunnah, and the ulama of Shia use it as a reference to Hadith and Sunnah, not just of the Prophet himself, but also their own Imams. Athar, on the other hand, refers to the precedent of the companions. And there is a great deal of convergence between Asar and Sunnah in Hadith, in view of the fact that the companions were the principal narrators and transmitters of the Sunnah of the Prophet. In Imam Malik's Al-Muwatta, for example, half of the hadith that he records actually are the precedent of the companions. Asar and hadith are converged, and he does not draw much of a distinction. To him, the companions were the carrier of the Sunnah. Sunnah, also sometimes the word is used in reference to the precedent of the rightly guided caliphs. There is even a hadith, alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnatu Abu Bakr wa Umar wa sunnatu khulafa rashidin min ba'di. You must follow my sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs after me. In early times, there was this convergence and confluence between these different phenomena, the living practice and tradition of the community, the precedent of the companions, the Sunnah of the Prophet. And when Imam Shafi came on the scene, he became the champion of the Sunnah, and he tried to establish the exclusive authority of the Sunnah above all else. Imam Malik accepted Athar, for example, as part of the Sunnah, but Al-Shafi'i disagreed, said that the Sunnah of the Prophet is unique and the authority of that Sunnah is above all other variations in meanings that were attached to Sunnah. Is there any proof in the Quran to tell us that Sunnah is an authoritative source of the Sharia? There are many references in the Quran. For example, that he does not speak of his own desire. Whatever he speaks is divinely revealed to him. Surah 53, verse 3. Then I mentioned that in many places the Quran demands obedience to the Sunnah of the Prophet. And in one place the text goes on to say that when he makes a decision, when he makes a judgment, it is a duty of the believers, men and women, to follow it, and to follow it willingly with submission. Then there is also after the demise of the Prophet, the Khulafa, the rightly guided caliphs, Abu Bakr and Umar, have gone on record on many occasions. They would ask the companions when they faced an issue whether there was any Sunnah of the Prophet, any saying of the Prophet that they might have heard about that particular issue. The famous letter of Umar, the second caliph, the Risala of Umar, addresses the judges and governors and strongly urges them to follow the Quran and then the Sunnah of the Prophet in reference to issues and cases that they determine. Now we discussed the classification of the Sunnah, and there are different classifications. The Sunnah has been classified in many ways, depending on the purpose of classification and the viewpoint of the researcher. But the broad classification we will be looking at it is from the viewpoint of the subject matter and the chain of transmission, from the viewpoint of matan and from the viewpoint of isnad. From the viewpoint of subject matter, the Sunnah has been classified initially into three types: verbal Sunnah, actual Sunnah, and tacitly approved Sunnah. Sunnah qawliya, Sunnah fi'liya, Sunnah taqririya. The normative variety of these three is the verbal Sunnah. It is generally held that the words of the Prophet, should there be any conflict between words and actual conduct, it is the words that commands higher authority. The words of the verbal Sunnah are the principal variety of Sunnah. The Hadith we quote, for example, of Sa'imati Zakat, and livestock Zakat is required in livestock. The actual Sunnah of the Prophet, there are many instructions. The Prophet has asked the people, the believers, to pray the way he actually prays himself, or to do the rituals of the Hajj the way I do. And the tacitly approved Sunnah or Sunnah taqririya, sometimes the companions did something and it came to the attention of the Prophet and he did not disagree with it. Sometimes he showed sign of approval, then that became tacitly approved sunnah or sunnah taqririyah. And there are many examples that I have given. Were two companions, for example, went on a journey. And the time of prayer came. There was no water. They performed tayammum or dry ablution. Later, when they found water, one of them did the same prayer again, this time with proper ablution. And then they narrated this to the Prophet. He said, both of you were right. So this became part of the tacitly approved sunnah. The companions sometimes say that we used to do such and such when the Prophet was alive. Like Al-Khudri, Sayyid Al-Khudri said that we used to give a bowl full of dates as charity of fitr at the end of Ramadan. And this becomes part of the sunnah of the Prophet. Even though it is a statement of the companion, presumably because the companion would not say such a thing as of his own behest. That is elevated, becomes marfu in part of the sunnah. Again, from the viewpoint of subject matter, the sunnah is divided into legal sunnah and non-legal sunnah, tashri'iyya and ghair tashri'iyya. The principal task and mission of the Prophet was to establish, to interpret the Quran and establish the rules of Sharia. Therefore, this is the legal sunnah that is the principal variety of sunnah we are looking at. But the Prophet as human being, he did many things as his natural activity, the colors he liked, the manner he spoke with people, the social encounter, and anything else. That does not necessarily bind his community that they follow him in every natural activity he might have done. Although there were some companions who were very pious. Abdullah ibn Umar used to follow the Prophet, and there is no objection to that, but that the ghair tashri'iyya does not establish the rule of Sharia, the rules of Sharia, and we are not bound by them. In matters of technical nature, like commerce, military tactics, and agriculture, there are instructions the Prophet has sometimes given. Those are also separate. And the Prophet, as a Prophet himself, sometimes the Quran addresses him individually and makes exception for him. For example, polygamy for his ummah, for his community, is limited at 4, but it did not apply to him. There are others that he performed connected fasting, running from one day to the next. That is his personal excellence. We are not required to follow that. There are examples of that kind. These are non-legal sunnah. Certain activities that the Prophet did fall between these two categories, legal and non-legal. For example, he performed the Hajj riding on a camel. Is it a requirement then for us? No, this is not a requirement. Certain things he did, for example, he grew a beard at a certain length. Are we required to do the same? Some ulama, the Hanafi, say it is part of the customary practice at that time. The Shafi think that this is also part of the Sunnah and it is good to follow that, it is mandub. But the division is made that certain instructions that fall in the category of non-legal Sunnah are separate from those that establish the rules of Sharia. Then the Sunnah Tashri'iyya or legal Sunnah is the exemplary conduct of the Prophet pertaining to the rules of Sharia in this also occurs in three capacities. When the Prophet acts in his principal capacity as the messenger of God, or when the Prophet acts in his capacity as head of state, or at times when he has acted as a judge in a particular dispute, then the question arises, what are we supposed to do with these different categories of legal sunnah? The first one, when the Prophet acts in his capacity as messenger of Allah, that establishes rules of Sharia independently, and we are not required to ask for permission of anyone else, government authority or judge or a learned person, to act on it. We can act on that directly. His instruction about the prayer, about the transactions and so on fall into this category, that they are independent of any permission for their practice. But when the Prophet acts in his capacity as head of state, that is understood to mean that when we act on such hadith or sunnah, we also require the permission of the head of state. For example, he has said, Man qatala qatilan falahu salabu. One who kills his opponent in the battlefield may own his belonging. Whether this was uttered in his capacity as messenger of Allah or head of state, probably more likely the later, but it is possible in there that it could be the former. There is some disagreement. In another hadith we read, Man ahya ardan maitatan falahu fahiya lahu. One who reclaims barren land becomes its owner, belongs to him. Now, are we required to ask permission of the head of state for this or not? Many prominent imams and ulama have gone on record that this is a statement made in his capacity as messenger of God, and we can act on it independently. The Hanafis maintain that there is likelihood of conflict arising if everyone occupies a certain piece of land and so on, and therefore rules have developed that it is recommendable that government permission is obtained first before one acts on that hadith. Now, the consequences of this distinction, although not are quite significant, although this distinction is not very clearly drawn, nor is it very easy sometimes to make that distinction, but it is important that we know about this classification of sunnah. There are occasions when the Prophet has acted as in his capacity as a judge in a particular dispute, in which case there are two aspects to a decision. One is the procedural part, the other is the actual ruling. The actual ruling becomes part of the Sharia, but the procedure is not necessarily a part of that. There was an occasion the wife, Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, came to the Prophet and complained that his wife did not provide enough for her and his child. The Prophet instructed her to take from the property of your husband what may be sufficient. This is the ruling. The ruling part becomes part of the Sharia, but how the evidential part and so on, that may not be part of the obligatory part of the Sharia. There are certain aspects of Sunnah relating to customary matters of Arab society, like quantitative quorums for zakat, like the quantities of jizya, like certain things were sold by measurement in weight. Later the custom changed. These are changeable, and here we do have the flexibility that we accept the changeable character of people's practice into the fabric of the Sunnah, as I have explained in my writings, the chapter on the Sunnah. In some legal Sunnah, by the look of the Hadith, when we look at, looks like Sunnah Tashri'iyya, but it is circumstantial. Like we read in a Hadith that when you urinate, do not face the Qibla, the Kaaba. Do not face the Kaaba, but face the east or the west. Now geographically Medina was in a certain location, but if you follow the Hadith in Morocco or North Africa, you would be doing the opposite of what it means. Therefore, we ought to read some of the Hadith that we encounter into a proper context and not to be too literal about the meaning we draw from them. Now, some discussion has arisen as to the distinction of the Quran and Sunnah. One level of distinction is, of course, that the Quran was documented, all of it, as and when it was revealed. The Sunnah was not documented. In fact, the Prophet has gone on record to ask his companions not to write down everything that he says. And this was in due regard for the Quran, that only the Quran was to be written down, but not his own Sunnah and Hadith. The companions during his lifetime, they did write some of the Hadith, and some have gone on record. Like Amr ibn As said that I used to write whatever I heard from the Prophet, and this is kept, and this is known as Sahifa Sadiqa, the true correct collection of the Hadith. There are other names, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Abi Shah, and Sa'd ibn Ubadah. They have also written the Hadith of the Prophet. It seems that the Prophet instructed the companions not to write from him in the early stages, when the concern was mainly with the documentation of the Quran. But in later stages, in the later years of Medina, when the Quran was mainly documented, then he also allowed his Sunnah to be written down. And the companions used to commit the Quran to memory, but they did not do that with regard to the Sunnah, although they did memorize, but with regard to the Quran, they used to verify with one another the accuracy of the text. But this they did not do with regard to Sunnah. And then, of course, the Quran is the first source of the Sharia. It is all received through continuous testimony or tawatur, whereas the large bulk of Hadith is being received through the report of odd individuals, and in the form of Hadith, as I will be later discussing in some further detail. The mutawatir Hadith, that is conclusively of proven authenticity, is very few, no more than 10 Hadiths altogether. And it is because of this, in respect of the weaknesses that exist in the transmission of Ahad Hadith, that disagreements have arisen over the meaning of Hadith and the authenticity, etc., etc. It is conclusively accepted that the Quran is the first source of the Sharia, and the Sunnah is explanatory and complementary to the Quran. And that is also the guideline for mujtahid, to take first recourse to the Quran, then to the Sunnah. Another distinction is, of course, that all of the Quran is wahy zahir, manifest revelation, as opposed to the Sunnah, which is wahy batin, inspiration or ilham. The words, in other words, belong to the Prophet initially, but the narrator have delivered and transmitted much of the Sunnah of the Prophet in their own words. Should there be any instances of conflict between one hadith and another hadith, then the principal attempt that the ulama have made is to reconcile them. But disagreements and conflict might have remained due to differences in the authenticity of the narration of hadith. Despite the distinction that we have clearly made, and there is not much of a dispute over it, some prominent scholars, one Amr al-Awza'i, an Imam, Abu Amr al-Awza'i, a Syrian prominent Imam, gone on record to say, as-Sunnah qadwiyatun ala al-kitab, that the Sunnah is the arbiter of the Quran. This has given rise to some disagreement. But the reason for that is that the Sunnah depends more on the Quran than the other way around. The Sunnah reiterates the Quran, and the Sunnah explains what may be mujmal or unclear in the Quran, and sometimes the Sunnah qualifies what is absolute and specifies what is general in the Quran. But the Sunnah also contains legislation that does not exist in the Quran. Here we have some disagreement. On the one hand, the greater dependency of the Quran on the Sunnah. The other, that the Sunnah also comes up with independent legislation. And that is the reason why Al-Awza'i went on record that the Sunnah is the arbiter of the Quran. But this actually irritated Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He said, how impudent to say this. The Sunnah is an explanation and supplement to the Quran, full stop. The Quran is the first source of the Sharia. The Quran is the arbiter of the Sunnah, not the other way around. But the function of the Sunnah with reference to the Quran is explained in the Quran itself. لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ. This was the mission of the Prophet, to explain to the people what has been revealed to them in the Quran. A subsidiary question has arisen whether Sunnah is an independent source or is it all of it supplementary to the Quran. The answer to that is that it is both, and this is what Al-Shatibi has gone on record to say. Simply because the Sunnah contains new legislation. I have given many instances in my book, the law of preemption or shufa, some of the rules pertaining to the marriage and divorce and zakat and the lawful and unlawful varieties of meat were only delivered by the Prophet, and nothing about it is found in the Quran. Yes, we do not dispute that the Quran does, that the Sunnah also provides new legislation. That does not, however, change the basic position that it is a supplementary to the Quran and it is a secondary source, but it is also an independent source of the Sharia in its own right. Next, we discuss the subject of distortion in forgery in Hadith. Scholars have gone on record to say that no other branch of Islamic scholarship has witnessed so much forgery as the Sunnah. There are several collections, numerous volumes in the name of mawdu'at, fabricated hadith, where the ulama over the ages have separated fabricated hadith and placed them in separate collections. That by itself is proof of the existence of fabricated hadith. And there is some disagreement as to the history of this fabrication. When did it actually start? Some say it started as early as the time of Abu Bakr, and the wars of Ridda, for example, against the refusers of zakat. But the more correct time segment is the year 40 Hijrah. This is when disagreements between the followers of Ali and Muawiyah led to military confrontation between parts of the community, and theological differences and juristic differences between the Shia and the Khawarij. They became more serious, and some of them tried to establish the veracity of their own views in their own positions and doctrines. And the misguided among them, when they failed to find any true hadith, then they fabricated hadith in support of their own position. And the fabricated hadith occurs in different contexts. One is a personality cult, then praise of Ali and denunciation of Muawiyah, etc., etc. The heretics or Zanadiqa, they discredited Islam, and they said ridiculous things, saying looking at a beautiful face is ibadah. And one among them, Ibn Abi Awja, went on record to say he had fabricated 4,000 hadiths on the subject of halal and haram. This may be an exaggeration. It's not an easy task to fabricate that number of hadiths, but it may have been uttered for his subversive purposes. Then the next context, the fabrication occurs in racial, linguistic, and tribal context. Some tribes praise others, and the Persians praise their own language, the Arabs praise their own language. Another context that forgery has occurred is by the pious storytellers and preachers. Sometimes they want to arouse the emotions of their audience, and they utter things that make exaggeration that are untrue. I have given example. They go on record to say exaggerated things about a very simple act. And there's exaggeration and reward and punishment for someone who reads a particular verse of the Quran, that there are rewards or severe punishment. Those are also the kind of things that found in fabricated hadith. Then we see that juristic and theological differences. Some have hadith that you raise your hands when you move to the ruku. Others say that no, you don't. If someone says the Quran is the created word of God, his wife becomes divorced on him as of that time, and so on. These are ridiculous statements, but the ulama have isolated them. Others have made flatteries about rulers and governors and so on. But scholars have gone on record to also identify the signs of forgery. And the signs of forgery have been classified into several types, 4, 5, 6 types. One, when there is a weakness in the reputation of the transmitter of hadith. There is a branch of the science of hadith, Asma'ur Rijal. In narrators of hadith, their biography, their character have been all documented, and some of them we know that these people were not reliable. The conditions of accepting a report of hadith from someone is that he has met directly his immediate source that received it from him. And scholars check the accuracy by reference to the locality they met, the date the encounter took place, the dates of birth, and so on. The second, in the context of the subject matter, also forgery has occurred, and the signs of forgery are identified firstly by reference to the crudity of the language. The Prophet used language, dignified language. Sometimes you find fabricated hadith that brings the level so rapidly it becomes obvious. Another sign of forgery in hadith is when someone says something irrational, contrary to reason. For example, the Ark of Noah went round the Kaaba 7 times before it stopped. This is not possible, and it is forgery, obviously. Another sign of forgery is that when the hadith says something contrary to the Quran. It is said that the offspring of zina will not enter paradise for 7 generations down the line. This is against the Quran. No one is to be punished for the evil conduct of any other. Then another sign of forgery is that a hadith, a statement is found to be ahistorical. His history cannot confirm it. For example, someone says, I entered the public bathhouse in Medina and saw the Prophet wearing a wrapper. Some say, we know from history that public bathhouses did not exist in Medina during the lifetime of the Prophet. So it becomes a sign of forgery. Next, number 5 is when fanatic statements, theological and juristic fanaticism and praise of this mazhab or that individual or this individual, these are signs of forgeries. Then also another sign of forgery is that the statement of the Prophet is supposed to be known by a countless number of people, and only one person reports it. This is a sign of forgery. Like it's said that one who touches his private part must refresh his ablution. Ablution is broken. No one has practiced it, and it has. If that kind of hadith is authentic hadith, it would not be like that. Then lastly, the sign of forgery I mentioned is when disproportionate, exaggerated punishment or reward is assigned to a minute kind of conduct. Uttering this word or that word would earn one paradise down the generations, and that kind of exaggerations. We now move on to the classification of hadith from the viewpoint of transmission. From the viewpoint of subject matter, we have classified and explained Here the hadith is classified into two main varieties: connected hadith, muttasil, with a connected chain of transmitters all the way to the Prophet, and disconnected hadith or ghair muttasil. The connected hadith is divided into three: mutawatir, proven by continuous testimony; in ahad, that solitary reports by odd individuals. In between, the Hanafis introduce an intermediate category, mashhur hadith, well-known hadith. Definition of the mutawatir is a report by indefinite number of people whose collusion upon fabricating a lie is inconceivable. A mutawatir hadith, the people live in different places in large in numbers. It is not possible to fabricate that kind of hadith. Mutawatir must fulfill certain requirements, and that is that the report must have been proven through sense perception, not something axiomatic. If someone says sugar is sweet and it is reported by a large number of people, we cannot accept it. Through sense perception. A large number of people. What number? Some says 20, some says 70 people, some says more or less. But Al-Ghazali says that the number of reporters is important, of course, but sometimes even a limited number, 4 or 5, is sufficient to establish mutawatir if there is supportive evidence, circumstantial evidence supported. It is not a requirement of mutawatir for the person to be an upright person, because the number is so large. Even a non-Muslim, a child, a woman can be a narrator of a mutawatir, and for that there is no bias in reporting. If that large number all belong to one particular mazhab, that will not be accepted. When these requirements are fulfilled, then mutawatir becomes, it can establish positive knowledge. Most people know their forefathers through tawatur, continuous testimony, even though they have not met them. I say Abu Bakr was first Khalifa, Umar was second Khalifa. Well, I have not met any of these, but I know through continuous testimony that this is proven. Then mutawatir is of two types. Mutawatir in words. The Prophet is quoted word for word, and this is very small, this kind of hadith in number. Mutawatir, conceptual mutawatir or mutawatir bil ma'na is quite frequent. Like everything the Prophet has said concerning the Quran, when he explains the Quran, concerning the 5 pillars, many people have said similar things. It becomes mutawatir in different words, but the meaning is the same. And then we have a mashhur hadith that by the Hanafis, basically it is a hadith that 1, 2 or 3 people have reported from the Prophet. But then it becomes very well known in the second generation or the first generation. It is a condition that it becomes very well known in the first generation according to the majority. And the Hanafis say even in the second generation of the successors of Tabi'un. Otherwise, we know that all hadiths became very well known. The difference is that mashhur, like the mutawatir, can establish positive knowledge and can establish a hukum of sharia, whereas the third variety that we now that we now explain the ahad hadith or solitary hadith is report of one or two odd individuals from the Prophet. Al-Shafi has referred to it as khabar al-khassa, others as khabar al-wahid, and because it is the transmitter is small in number, one person or two, it does not establish positive knowledge. There is an element of doubt. Although this is there is a difference of opinion. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal says that it does establish positive knowledge. Al-Shafi'i also says, provided that we establish the authenticity of the isnad in the uprightness of the narrator of hadith. The Zahiris went on record to say that it is only natural to say that the ahad hadith does establish positive knowledge. It would be unnatural for the Prophet, when he wanted to say something, to gather the people of Medina and only then speak. He has spoken in all capacities, sometimes in front of one person or sometimes many people. This is the Jumhur position. The Jumhur position is that when the narrator is reliable, we accept ahad hadith as a basis of hukum of Sharia. And many companions after the lifetime of the Prophet, we know that they reported something from the Prophet. One individual has, Mughira ibn Shu'bah, said something about the portion of the grandmother to Umar al-Khattab, and he accepted it. And there were other examples, as I have explained. But as for the narration, the uprightness of the narrators of ahad hadith, there are several conditions that it must fulfill. First, that the transmitter of hadith is a competent person. Although a blind person, slave and woman, they are all included, but they must have possession of their faculties. Second is that the reporter was a Muslim during the time he reported the hadith. Although at the time he received the hadith, he may have not been a Muslim. But at the time of delivery, there were some companions who received certain hadith when they were, before they had embraced Islam. So that is, then that the transmitter, the reporter, has not known to have committed major sins or persisted in minor sins. And the upright, this is an upright person. But who is an adil, an upright? There are differences of opinion as to what actually establishes the adala. What does it consist of? And there is some detail that the adala, some say the reputation of a person is sufficient. Others say different things. And the tazkiyah, the procedure of tazkiyah, that is the confirmation of the character of one person by true witnesses. That is another way of establishing the uprightness. The uprightness of a person cannot be taken for granted. It must be proven affirmatively, whether it is by report of other people or through reputation, or when someone learned has spoken well of the reliability of another person. And for that, the reporter has a retentive memory. Retentive memory, when he receives something, he listens to it properly, he makes every effort to retain it, and then he delivers it the way he received it. And 5, that he is not known to have tampered in the words of hadith. And number 6, the sixth condition is that the reporter has received the report directly from his source, not through the report of other individuals. And there are certain expressions that are stronger in terms of the delivery of its message. If someone says, I heard the Prophet, sami'tu, this is stronger than saying the Prophet said such and such. There are these different terminologies the fuqaha, the ulama have established. And the Hanafis also impose this condition that the reporter has not acted against his own report. And someone delivers a message, if he is known to have acted contrary to what he has reported, then that is a sign of weakness of that report. And there are one or two other conditions the Hanafis impose, that it is not something that a large number of people should have known about, and only one person has reported. And again, the Hanafis say if the reporter is not a faqih, then his report must be in conformity with the normal rules. When these conditions are fulfilled, then the Ahad Hadith does establish the rules in ahkam of the Sharia. Imam Shafi has proposed 4 conditions. The reporter is honest and truthful. Second, that he has known the message of the hadith. Third, he has a good memory. And fourth, that he has it is not contrary to the other bulk of other hadiths. The 4 Imams of jurisprudence have accepted the Ahad Hadith, and they also accept that the fact that a great deal of the Hadith is delivered in the word of the transmitters and reporters themselves. Then there is the disconnected or غير متصل hadith. غير متصل hadith is the one variety is mursal. There are several varieties of disconnected hadith, and the difference is whether the link where the connection broke is in the first generation, the companions, and that is mursal, or in the second generation, or down the line. And according to this, the ulama have classified the hadith in several varieties. Al-Shafi accepts mursal if it is supported by other mursal, or when the ulama have generally agreed to it, and or the companions have acted accordingly, and the reputation of the narrator is not in doubt. And lastly, a classification of hadith I'll briefly mention before I conclude is in 3 classes of sahih, hasan, da'if. Sound hadith, good hadith, and weak hadith. Basically, the ulama have divided the reporters of hadith into 10 classes from the viewpoint of their reliability and trustworthiness. The first 3 classes, when they report, this is authentic sahih hadith. The next 4 categories establish hasan hadith, and the rest is weak hadith and zaif hadith. When we look at the authenticity of hadith, we look at the weakest link. Even if one element is weak, the whole of the hadith is disqualified. And according to the weakness where it actually occurs, these hadiths are also subclassified into different categories. Thank you.